to the cloud. All right. Good morning. Thank you so much. Lori, the floor is all yours. And again, thank you everyone for joining us.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. As Christine said, thank you for joining. We are focusing today on all things Category 1 with the 471. When we look at our agenda, let me get my mouse working. We've had some technical issues this morning. Here's our agenda. So we always start out with filing basics because 471, we file this once a year, trying to remember, all the rules around it. When do we file, the purpose, right? So just kind of a refresher if you've been filing for a while. If you're brand new, again, help you, understand the purpose of this form. We'll talk briefly about accessing the portal, what you need to do there. When we talk about filing a 471, if you do have a new contract, before you actually start the form, it's very important that you go in and you upload the contract, right, within Epic, so that when you go to file the 471 application, you point to the contract. All right, so I will walk you through that. And then we'll talk about the 471 itself. Now, several flavors here. We'll talk about what does it look like if you have a new contract, right? And you want to create that funding request. If you have a month-to-month service, we'll talk about what that means versus CABIO, right? How we file that. Or if you have a continuing contract, if you have, one that's maybe you're in year 2 or more of a 5-year contract, right? A multi-year contract, you can simply copy what you entered last year, right? So if the speeds, the cost, things haven't changed, it's a really great feature, right? Within the portal. Makes it very easy to file. We'll end the 471 talking about, completing it. What does it take to certify it? Explaining what the fields are asking for. And then we'll end the morning with next steps, what to expect after you submit the form. But like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know. All right, so filing basics. So this is, there's multiple forms that we file, throughout the funding year. I have referred to the 471 as the Mac Daddy of all the forms. This is the most complicated of the applications. Not that it's so hard to understand. It's just there's a lot of information that you have to pull together, right, in order to file this. Now, 471s have to be filed every single year. It doesn't matter if you're, this is coming up on year 5 of a 5-year contract. So you've told, USAC the last 4 years you want this funding. You still have to go in and tell them on the 5th year you want this funding, right? We have to file this every single year. Now, if you did file a form 470, right, that's the bidding form. Remember, you have to wait the minimum 28 days, right, from the time you file that form. On the 29th day, you can start evaluating your bids and choosing your vendor. Just make sure, go back and verify what is that allowable contract date, meaning that's the 29th day from whenever you file that 470. All right. And again, let me know if you have questions. Now, the all-important filing window, right? We wait each year for the FCC to announce this. So the window did open on January 21st this year. In the fall with the government shutdown, the FCC was furloughed. So everything's been pushed back a little bit this year. Christine and I were just commenting how this year just seems a little off, a little strange. For me, things have just been pushed back. All right. So again, it did open on January 21st. It is scheduled to close on April 1st, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. All right. So now I mentioned about the 470. If you still have time to file that, right? But the deadline to file the 470 will be March 4th. We always wait until we get the 471 filing dates. What is that deadline? We count back 29 days, and that determines the 470 deadline. All right. Now, I mentioned you still have time if you realize there's something else you need, right? Something new that you need to add. You realize your contract's coming up, right? For it's going to expire this coming June 30th, I should say. So you may need to file a 470. All right. So just know if you file on that March 4th date, that means basically you cannot file the 471 until April 1st on that 471 deadline. All right. Just keep that in mind. Don't wait that long if at all possible. Now, when we talk about category one, just to make sure everybody understands, category one, we're talking about data transmission and or internet access. Now, this does include hotspots for bookmobiles, or if you've got a kiosk, a remote kiosk. I do need to remind everyone, last year the FCC, for this short period of time, approved hotspots for off-premise, so hotspots for patrons, right? Well, that's been rescinded. That is no longer eligible, right? All of that's been pulled back. But hotspots for, bookmobiles, kiosks, because that is considered on-premise, library sites, right? So that does continue to be eligible. So don't confuse the two, because the forms have not been updated yet to remove, all right, that previous eligibility. Cat 2, this is the internal connections, that connectivity equipment, the maintenance of that, the management of that. We'll be covering how to file for Category 2 in a separate training session. Today, we're just focusing on that Category 1. Now, when we go to file the 471, you can have multiple forms. Just know that if you are planning on filing for both Cat 1 and Cat 2, you have to file a minimum of two 471s. We cannot mix Category 1 and Category 2 items on the same application. Now, if you are filing, say, for multiple Category 1 services, you can put those services on the same 471 application. So you can have multiple funding requests. All right. But I've gotten this question several times here in the last week, so I thought I would update my slide. All right. Just kind of as a reminder. All right. Now, if you like I said, if you're filing a single 471, but you have multiple services, right? In order to determine, do I need to split this out into multiple funding requests? Let's say you're purchasing service from 2 or more service providers, all right? Even if it's the same, type service. Maybe you're getting bandwidth from one service provider for one branch library, right? But a different provider, all right, for another branch, all right, because it's 2 different service providers, 2 different service provider identification numbers. Those have to be split into 2 different funding requests. All right. Now, Cat 2, I included this in here. I'll cover this more when we do the Cat 2 funding. All right. But if, let's say, you have you're purchasing service from the same service provider, but it's under 2 different 470s or 2 different contracts, even if it's the exact same bandwidth, the same cost, right, the same service provider, but it's, you requested this on 2 different 470s, that would require you to have 2 different funding requests. All right. Someone sent me their 470 the other day to look over, and they had 2 different contracts, same service provider, one for a branch that had been in place for quite a while, and then a new contract for a new branch. And then they were trying to roll all of that into the same funding request, and that was not allowed. All right. So again, if it's 2 different contracts, 2 different 470s, it has to be 2 different funding requests. Now, just a couple of things here as far as prerequisites. The schools had until January 16th to go into the E-rate portal. It was the admin window period of time when they go in and they update their enrollment and their lunch counts. All right. Now, some schools were not able to get that done. The reason I stress this to our libraries is because that's how your discount rate is determined. It's based on the information the school district provided. The school district, wherever the main library is located, all right, that school district's information will determine the discount rate. All right, so they may not have gotten their data updated. They may have. So when we go into the portal, I'll show you where to go in and verify, what your discount rate is. Just know that if they did not get that information updated by that January 16th date, your discount rate may change, may go up. That's what we see typically, right? But in a few, rare occasions, it could go down. Now, contracts, I mentioned, that before you file a 471, if you have a new contract, all right, you need to make sure, get that signed and dated, right? And because you'll reference that for each funding request. All right, so accessing the portal. I know most of you know this already, but we go to usac.org. You can also do the /e-rate, all right, that will work as well. But you'll see the option toward the upper right where it says sign in. All right, now your username is just your email address. Keep in mind, if you've not been in the portal for a while, passwords expire after about 45 days. So if you go to log in and it doesn't remember your password, you may have to click on forgot password. It'll send you an email, create a new password. Now, the system also uses multi-factor authentication. All right, so you can set this up. The default is to have that email to you, and you have to provide a new code every single time you go to log in. You can also change the settings from we call this the dashboard, right? Once you initially log in, you can click, you'll see a pull down here by your username, and then you'll see settings. You can add a cell phone number so you can get the code via text. That's always a good idea to add that. We've had some folks get hacked and had issues with their email, so they weren't able to get the code to be able to log in. So I really suggest that you add the MFA option via text. Now, when you do get logged in, it takes you initially to this dashboard. Now, it is confusing for folks that are new with this. You'll see schools and libraries, but then it looks like a couple of descriptive paragraphs. It's really a menu option. All right, so here we're going to click on the first option where it says E-Rate Productivity Center, EPC. Now, when you first log in, it will take you to what's called the landing page. That's your E-Rate homepage. All right. Now, if you scroll down, a couple of things here to be aware of. Let me jump back up here to the top. As you click through the various menu options, right, in the portal, sometimes it's okay, I need to get back to the landing page, but how do I do that? Right. So at any time, if you see this USAC logo, that's the shortcut. All right, it's kind of like that hidden Easter egg in a video game, right? That is the shortcut to get back to the landing page. Now, if you scroll down the section here that says My Entities, if you're a library system, the very first entity will be what we call the build entity. All right, so denotes the library system. If you're an independent library, obviously you'll just have the one entity listed. All right, but if we click on this first item here, right, our library system, our bin, then we're going to see some additional menu options. All right, so I mentioned, very important that you go in, verify the discount rate, should the district, have gone in and updated their information. So you'll see some menu options here right about in the center. Okay, it says discount rate. Right, so when I click there, then it's going to show me, okay, here's the total enrollment district-wide. Then it's going to show here's the count that the district entered as far as the number of students qualifying for the lunch, the free and reduced lunch program. As we read across, then you'll see your category 1 discount rate and then your category 2. All right, so again, just verify that. Now, also, I'm just going to point out here, we'll cover it more when we talk about category 2 later this week. But for libraries during that admin window, you should have updated or corrected your square footage if you are going to apply for category 2, because that's how your Cat 2 budget is determined. All right, so if you are going to, plan on applying for Cat 2, go into the portal, verify those numbers, make sure that those are correct. If not, start gathering that information so that when we go through the category 2 training, we'll talk about how to go about correcting those numbers now that the admin window is closed. There's a workaround there. So just a heads up there. All right, entering contracts. Just check and make sure there are no questions out there. Okay, let's see. Christine, it looks like someone's sitting in the waiting room.
Oh, just got that. Sorry. Thank you.
I just saw that pop up in the corner of my eye here.
Yep.
So just
you saw it before me, but we're good.
Perfect. Okay, so we are required to associate contracts, right, when we're creating these funding requests. So really important that you set this up before doing the 471, because otherwise, very short, in a very short time frame, you get into the 471, it's going to ask, how are you purchasing? And if you say, well, it's a contract, and you've not uploaded the information, you have to get out of the application, basically create the contract record, get back in again. Now, I do want to point out here, if you're requesting what we call month-to-month service, that means that there's no contract in play. You could end the service at any time and there's no penalty. Now, if you are using month to month, we see this most often. It could be with that CABIO service, the hotspot. Say you have a hotspot from Verizon, T-Mobile, whatever. You can use a current bill, right, to determine your cost. Well, there is no contract, so you do not have to complete this part. All right. So if you don't have any contracts, you might want to go grab a cup of coffee or some tea. Right. We'll be a few minutes. All right, so to get to the contract module, just like we saw the discount rate, click where it says, your billed entity. So in this case, my library system, first one in the list. Oh, don't forget, if you filed a 470, right, you got quotes in, before signing the contract, make sure you set up a bid matrix. Now, if you go out to my website, there's an E-rate resource page, and I do have the sample document out there. All right, it's a Word document, so you can update the factors. Just make sure that price is always given the highest number of points. If you don't need to use these factors, you can take those out. You can tweak that however you need. All right, but again, very important that you set this up. All right, if this is that if you put the 470 out there and you received multiple bids. Now, at the bottom of the table, I've added the text there where you can plug in, the name of the winning vendor, and then the type service that they're providing. Be sure to sign and date this. Now, because I've gotten this question the last training sessions that I've conducted, you keep this in your files. You do not send this to USAC unless they request it. They typically do not request the bid matrix and copies of bids received during your typical 471 review process. They will ask for it, though, if you get audited. That's one of the first things they ask for. So if you get 2 or more bids, you set this up and then keep both the matrix as well as all winning and losing bids. Keep all of that in your files. All right, so to create a contract record. So after we click on the build entity name, all right, you'll see it just a couple of slots down from discount rate where it says contracts. All right, so when we click there, then you see the option to manage contracts. Now, it will also show you all of the previously submitted contract records, right? Now, the portal, okay, the EPIC portal came into being in 2016. This portal does not allow us to delete any contract records once they've been submitted. Even if you entered it in error, you made a mistake, you'd never referenced it on a 471 in the past, you cannot delete it. You cannot go back and edit it, all right, to make corrections. If you realize after you submit the contract record that you did make a mistake, you have to start all over again, all right, once it's been submitted. All right, so here I'm going to click on Manage Contracts. All right, then we see the option here to add a new contract. Now, I also want to point out here, because there are a number of steps, if let's say you're in the middle of this and you have to, step out for whatever reason, you can click on, you'll see here at the bottom here, it says Save and Close, to get back into that contract record because it hasn't been submitted yet. All right, we can click here where it says, before clicking on Add a New Contract, contract type, click on the pull down. There's only one of 2 options, either contracts that have been submitted or contracts that are still in draft form. So click on the pull down and choose contract drafts. You'll see, the item that's still sitting out there. You'll simply check the box to the left and then come over and you'll see the edit option. All right, that'll become active after you check that box. It just picks up wherever you left off. All right, so here I'm going to click on Add a New Contract. Now, with this portal, everything wants a nickname. All right, this is user defined, but I suggest make it something that will make sense to you down the road, right? If you have to go back and reference this contract, that it will make sense to you, or maybe if you're looking at retiring soon, right? That, someone coming behind you will be able to figure out what's in that record. I've seen some applicants over the years name that, like contract A, contract B, and nobody has any idea what that actually contains. All right. So make the nickname descriptive. All right. So you can put the name of the provider, you can put, the term if it's FY2026 through FY 2031, right? Yeah. Or win the lottery. Yeah. You know what? I keep thinking, boy, if I won the lottery, one small snag there, you got to buy a ticket. And I haven't done that. So yeah, or win the lottery. Okay, so give it the nickname. All right. Now, contract number, some contracts may have a number. This is not a required field, right? So don't sweat it. Don't go out and spend a lot of time trying to find the contract record. This is just for your reference. All right, save and continue. Now, you'll notice the breadcrumbs. All right, I commented that there are several steps. All right, so contract information. It asks this question: would you like to upload a copy of the contract? Yes or no? And I've had some applicants over the years saying, well, I'm not required to upload it. It gave me the option to say no. Well, you can say no, all right? Just know that if you don't upload a copy of the contract, you are guaranteeing, all right, that a reviewer is going to reach out to you to say, hey, we need a copy of the contract. Sometimes, we get funding letters without ever having, received any questions because all the documentation was already right there in the portal. All right. So it is indeed your choice whether to upload or not. Just know that if you don't, you're going to be getting those review inquiries. All right. So here I said yes. All right. And then it gives you the option to click on upload. Now, we do get this text box here. You can be, I suggest it being descriptive with the file name or the nickname. All right. Here you can give even more information. So again, this is so, you can go back or someone else can come behind you, and really understand what's in that contract. Again, that's, it's not a required field. It's up to you whether you want to provide more info. All right. So once we have that, save and continue. Now, I do want to point out here, I don't see this as much with the libraries. I see it a lot with the schools, but some contracts will allow you to make changes. Okay. Some will allow you maybe during the course of, say it's a 5-year contract. Some may allow you to increase the bandwidth during the term of the contract. If you have a contract that does allow for that and you decide, midterm to do that, that upgrade, most vendors will give you some type of addendum to say, okay, here's the new bandwidth and here's the cost. If you're in a situation like that, I suggest taking that addendum, attaching it to your original contract, and you create a new contract record. All right. You can do that. If you don't create the new record, then the reviewers, you can still go ahead and, on the 471 show, here's the new bandwidth amount, the speed and the cost. But again, the reviewer will reach out to say, okay, give us the documentation, all right, to prove, this information. All right. But again, just be prepared if you do make a change. Some contracts, and again, I see it more with schools than I do with libraries, but some contracts will also allow you, let's say the contract is an initial 5-year term. At the end of that 5 years, they may give you the option to do what we call a voluntary extension. It has to clearly state that in the contract if it allows for it, right? So at the end of the 5-year term, it may allow like 2 or 3 1-year extensions. So if you do have that language in your contract, at the end of that initial term, you just notify the vendor that you do want to use that extension. Again, they may give you an addendum to sign. All right. And then you can upload that with the original contract and extend it. Yeah. And Christine, thank you for making that note. Yeah. It's one of those things. It's that pay now, pay later.
You cannot over document, my friends. You cannot over document. And we may or may not have been cursing the person who did not document well during that process yesterday. It was not pretty. So document, retain your documents, do all those things because, oh boy, you will regret it later if you don't.
Like I said, pay now, pay later, and the heartburn it causes when you don't document. Ugh, document everything. All right, so all of my explanations here. Click on save and continue. Okay, now it does ask the question here, is this contract based on state master contract? Yes or no? For our libraries, oftentimes it may be based on a state contract. It may not, right? So if you're not sure, check with the service provider. All right. Again, yes or no there. This question here, is this contract based on multiple award schedule? For most of our applicants in the state, the answer is no. All right. Now, if you're not quite sure what it's asking for here, you'll see the little question mark there. Just hover on it. It'll give you some explanation. All right. Save and continue. Now, we still get this, what we call piggyback questions. When you first get to this screen, you're only going to see one question. All right, this initial one. Can other applicants piggyback off this contract? Yes or no? Typically, the answer is no. I know last year when Oakland filed a 470, for the patron hotspots, all right, we were able to piggyback off some of that. All right. But again, in most cases, the answer is no. Once you answer that question, though, then you get the secondary question. Was this contract originally created by another applicant that you can then piggyback off their contract? All right. Again, typically the answer is no there. All right. Click on save and continue. Okay, now this is the real meat of this contract record. All right, now it starts out by asking a couple of things here. Here at the very top, it's how many bids were received. All right, so that's how many, valid bids. If you receive a bid from a company that got disqualified for whatever reason, right, you would have to state on the 470, this is what's going to get you disqualified, right? But if they were indeed disqualified, do not count them in this number. These are the actual valid bids that you put on that bid matrix. All right, so what's that number? And then it asks, was a 470 filed? Yes or no? All right, now remember, 470s are required for everything under category 1 except CABIO. All right, that's that commercially available bandwidth option, and we'll talk more about that here shortly. All right, but that's the only time you would not have to file a 470. Everything else requires it. All right, so most cases you're going to indicate yes. Now, it does ask, was this 470 filed prior to 2016? Because again, the portal came into being in 2016. I don't see many people referencing, a pre-2016 470, but it could happen. If you answer yes there, then you have to manually key in that old 470 number. The portal doesn't see anything prior to 2016. All right, and then we search for the posted 470s. Now, the build entity, that is the default search method, right? So you don't need to, plug anything in there. So you could come over and click on search. You can also search, though, by the 470 number, all right? If you have that, if you remember the nickname, all right, you can do a partial name search. So if you put FY2026 in the nickname, you can search by that. All right. Searching by bin, like I said, that's the easiest. That's the default. Keep in mind, it's going to populate every 470, right? It's going to list every 470 that has been in the portal since 2016. Okay, so a couple of things you can do to sort to make sure you're grabbing the most current, the correct 470. All right, so when I click on search, like I said, you may get, quite a list there. All of the column headers, you can click on those to sort. So the easiest thing to do, what I typically do, I come over to the third column where it says funding year. When you click it the first time, it's going to bring the oldest to the top, right? Click it a second time, it's going to resort it and give you the newest at the top, all right, the most current. So you want to look for, if this is a brand new 470, look for 2026. It's also going to show you whatever nickname you gave that form. So if maybe you had a 470 for category 1 and a 470 for category 2. All right. So again, you can verify the nickname, how descriptive were you there? But also, if you come to the very last column, it's going to say, well, here are the service types that were listed on that 470. All right. So if you filed a 470 just with Cat 1 items, it's going to say data transmission and or internet access. Remember, on the 470, you are allowed on that form to put both Cat 1 and Cat 2 items. All right. Again, that will be reflected here under the service type. All tips on making sure you grab the right 470. All right. So if this is the correct one, you check the box, save and continue. Okay, so now we're identifying the service provider. Now, account number, again, that's not a required field. If you have an account number, say, listed on your hotspot bill, right, you can certainly put that on there. Again, that's not required. All right, but then we search by, for the service provider. Now, we can search by the SPIN, the service provider identification number, or you can search by name and even do a partial name. But I do caution you, if you're searching by name, depending on the service provider, if it's a national level company, they more than likely will have multiple spins. All right. So then you risk, if you do a name search, which one do I use? Most vendors will put that on, or service providers will put that on the quote, but not always. If you know you're using the same vendor as you've used previously, all right, you can go out and look at last year's 471. Here, when we get into the application, I'll show you another site that I typically use, the E-Rate Central site. That's the easiest for going out and grabbing the information.
I was just going to ask you, Lori, when in doubt, what do you do? There we go. E-Rate Central to the rescue.
In fact, let me see if I can jump over here while we're talking about it. Let me see if I can. Sorry, I got a busy screen here. All right, so this is their site. So it's just e-ratecentral.com. And I lived in Chillicothe for years. And build entity numbers stick in my head. So I'm going to put in. So what we do is, once you go to the E-Rate Central site, and they do have a job posting out there, scroll down, you'll see this gray box, funding history search. Put in, this is the hardest part. You have to know your build entity number. All right. Plug in the number and we click on the pointer there. And the reason I use this site, they do not use this as a marketing tool. All right. E-Rate Central is a national consulting company, but they put this out there free of charge, no hassle for you to use the data. All right. In fact, if you go back and you click on state information and click on Ohio, it's going to show you, my information as state coordinator. All right. But what we can do is we can come down here, the first column, this is the funding year. I can click on 2025 and it shows me all of the funding request, okay, for the library system. And in this third column, it says, here's the spin, right? So I can just come here and double click and highlight it, copy and paste. That is the easiest, because to get into Epic and pull down, a PDF of the 471 takes a lot more time, right? Gives you a wealth of information. And we're going to be referencing this again here shortly. It also tells you, do you still have funds out there that need to be dispersed? Lots of data. All right, so I put in my spin, I click on search, it comes back, with the confirmation, yes, that is correct. Check the box to the left, save and continue. Okay, so now it's going to ask us, is this a multi-year contract? Yes or no? Well, go back and check the terms, check your contract. All right. If for category 1, typically contracts are, multi-year, 3-year, 5-year. All right. So indicate, yes, if this is a multi-year. Then it's asking, what's the date you awarded your contract? Now, this is the date that whoever has the authority at the library system, signed and dated that contract, right? USAC does not, I'm going to say, really care about when the service provider signed and dated it. They're looking at, when did the E-Rate applicant date it? All right, what is that date? All right, so plug that date in. Remember, it has to be on or after the allowable contract date. In fact, the portal has gotten, it's been programmed quite well. I like to say it's gotten smart, that if you try pointing to a 470 where the allowable contract date hasn't been reached yet, it will pop up with an error message saying, you can't do this yet. You haven't met the 28-day waiting period. All right, so it does save us from ourselves. All right, but just another reminder, right? Cannot do this step until after you've waited that 28-day bidding period. All right, so once we have the date in, save and continue. Okay, now this is where, I mentioned that some contracts will have language saying that you can do this voluntary extension. All right, so it's asking, does this contract allow for that? If no, all right, no and go on, right? No and save and continue. If you indicate yes, then it's going to ask, so what is the contract expiration date if you use all of those extensions? All right. So if you have, let's say, a 5-year contract that allows for 2 1-year extensions, that means you could turn that 5-year into a 7-year contract term. All right. So when would that expire? So I could take it beyond that 2031. I could take it out to, to June 30th, 2033. All right. So I still have 2 extensions. I haven't used any of these. But then it asks the strange question, okay, well, how many months will that be? Well, this is a brand new 5-year plus an additional 24 if I choose, right? If I do, yeah, 5 years, 60 months, 24, I can't do math today, right? 84 months. Now, I do want to caution you, a lot of contracts will say, at the end of the initial contract, it's just going to auto renew every year until you tell us you don't want the service anymore. That is not considered a voluntary extension, not the way E-rate defines it. All right, voluntary extensions has to have a hard deadline sometime in the future, right? It has to die at some point, right? If it does that auto renewal, USAC refers to that as an evergreen contract, and at the end of the initial term, you have to go back out to bid again. All right, that does not count. I hope that all made sense. All right, so we click on save and continue. All right, so this question here, pricing confidentiality, if I could say it, 99.9% of the time the answer is no. If you answer yes, this is basically, sharing or not sharing, pricing information from your vendor. Vendors are not allowed to simply say, we don't want you to share our pricing. All right, it has to be based on some legal action. So if you indicate yes, you have to upload that legal document. All right, cannot be based on just a vendor saying, we don't want you sharing. All right, so that's why 99.9% of the time it's no. Save and continue. Okay, really important last step here. This is going to display how you answered all of those questions, right? What 470 did you use? How many bids, the award date, all that detail, right? Check it over. If you see that you made a mistake, you can click on back. It takes you back one screen at a time, right? Go back, you're going backwards through those breadcrumbs, get to this, with the screen, the page that you need to make the correction. All right. And then save and continue and come back to the spot again. All right. Because once you come over here and you hit complete, it is in there forever, right? You cannot go back. You can't delete it. You cannot edit it. All right. If you realize after you hit complete, you have to start all those steps over again. All right. And this is something we have begged USAC and the FCC about, changing that. It hasn't worked yet. All right. Any questions on the contract? I know it's a lot of information. Okay. I always say either I explained it well or stunned silence. Let me know which. All right. So once I click on complete, then it's going to come back and say, okay, here are your submitted contracts. If you have a second contract you need to upload, simply click on add new contract, right? Complete the next one. All right, so once you're done adding those contracts, right, now we're going to start the 471. All right, so from the landing page, there's a couple of ways you can get to the form. The easiest is using the shortcuts in the upper right-hand corner. So you'll see where it says FCC Form 471, right? Just click on that hyperlink. Now, I do want to point out here, I mentioned that about, did the districts update their data, right? If they did not get that done or you didn't update, some information in the portal, it's going to display the same information that you had for funding year 2025, right? If that, if the update was not done by that January 16th date. All right, so we click on 471. Again, it's going to ask for a nickname. All right, so here, again, make it descriptive, because if you have multiple 471s to be able to distinguish one from the other. Again, I've seen people, name it, 471, A, B, C, and D. And then I've gotten phone calls saying, can you tell me what's in this? And then we've had to work through, picking it apart to figure it out. All right, so give it a nickname, save and continue. Now, I do want to point out, as we go through this, you'll see the option here for discard form. All right, so let's say you start this in error and you realize, okay, I'm not going to use this form. Make sure you discard. This is something I typically recommend, like after you file your 470, your 471, go back and see, do you have any complete forms sitting out under tasks? And I'll show you where to find that. Because the portal, let's say you start an application and you get interrupted. The system quite often will time you out. You have to go back to tasks to pick up where you left off. A lot of times people forget that. So they just simply start a new form. Well, now you've got this incomplete form sitting out there. Typically about mid-April, early May, Epic starts auto sending emails saying, you didn't submit your 471. You need to go into the portal and get this done. And that's when I get lots of panic phone calls. Yeah, it's quite unnerving when you get that email.
Yeah, I can second that one too. Clean up after yourselves. You'll save yourselves headaches later. Pay now, pay later, just like Lori was saying earlier.
Exactly. I got a call from someone, it was after last year's filing. Um, and she was getting lots of emails, and we went in and checked, and she had something like a dozen incomplete forms sitting out there. Right. And it was well past the deadline to file. So we went through each one individually and discarded them to do that cleanup. All right. So we got the nickname, save and continue. So really important after that conversation, how do we go in? Where do we find that form if I previously started it, but I had to get out of the portal, right? So if you go up on this blue menu bar, you'll see where it says tasks. Look for, it'll say create 471. It should say continue. I say this every year, but it says create. It means you previously created it, but it's not been submitted yet. But it will also show the application number the system assigned, as well as the nickname that you gave it. All right, so that blue text is the hyperlink. Click there, it picks up where you left off. All right, so again, that's how you get back into the application. Now it asks, are you the main contact? Yes or no, right? Because anybody filling this out, right, you had to be able to log into the portal. When you click on yes, it's going to auto-populate your contact information based on how you logged in. So if maybe you're logging in as someone at your library system, it's that other individual who's going to be listed as the contact on the form. All right, because again, you have to have a portal account to do this. All right, now if you indicate no, you can go out, start typing in a name, but again, you'd have to have a portal account, all right, to be able to be listed. Now it does have this text box here, holiday or summer contact information. So, if you're going on vacation over the summer and you're going to be away for, a period of time, it's up to you. Put your information in, that alternate contact information in the text box. So if you're willing to, to monitor this other, contact means, all right, to be able to answer those questions, because the sooner you answer the questions, the sooner you get your funding letter. Again, it's optional. All right, save and continue. Now on the form, I mentioned that you cannot mix category 1 and category 2 items on the same 471. So this is the point where the form is asking, okay, which of the two categories are you listing on this application, Cat 1 or Cat 2? Now, once we choose the category and we click on save and continue, it basically formats the form, all right? And you're locked in. So if you accidentally click on Cat 2, and you didn't intend to apply for Cat 2, click on discard the form and start over again. All right, another good time that you would want to discard. All right, so here I'm selecting category 1. All right, save and continue. Now, the next couple of slides or screens that you'll see, it's just information that's within Epic that it's basically pulling that information and populating that on your form. There is nothing you can change, right? It's just, just to show you, all right? It's just being populated on the application. So it says, this is indeed the build entity. Save and continue. Then it's going to say, well, okay, here are all the related entities. So if you're a library system, it's going to show, the main library and all your branches. If you have a bookmobile listed there. Now, I do want to point out, look through that list. And if you realize that, oh, we had this new branch, it's not listed here. All right. You will need to reach out to USAC, all right, to make sure that they create that entity number. That's not something we can do ourselves. That does not prevent you, though, from moving forward and filing the 471. When you get to the narrative, you can explain that this is a circuit for, this new library site, and the entity number, is yet to be determined. Or if USAC has already created it and given it to you, if this is happening, well, it would be happening if you do this now, after the close of the admin window. All right. Because things have been locked down, that new entity, more than likely does not show up here. Again, hope that makes sense. All right. Just verify, is everyone listed there? Save and continue. Now it's going to show us, as a library system, okay, here's the school district's information, the district, that's associated with the main library. All right. And shows us the discount information. Now you can click on show additional information. It will show you like the breakdown of the schools. Okay, save and continue. Okay, now we're at the real meat of the 471, right? Creating funding requests. Now I like to explain this as this is in like part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is where we say, well, this is how we're purchasing. Yes, this is a contract. We go out, we search for the contract we just created, right? Do that association, and we get some detail within the narrative. All right, that's all part 1. Part 2 is where we state specifically, here's the bandwidth speed. Here are the library sites that's receiving this service. Here's that cost. All right, so again, it's that more detailed information. That's all part 2. So we start by clicking on Add FRN. And it asks for a nickname, okay? So I'll say, okay, this is FY2026 bandwidth. Now, I was doing some training yesterday, and I got the question. It's, well, this is a 5-year contract. Do I go ahead and say this is the cost and all the detail for 5 years? No. When we file this, we're saying that for this upcoming funding year, all right? So 2026 funding year, meaning services from July 1, 2026 to June 30th, 2027. Here is the cost for this upcoming year, all right? Just those 12 months. No more than 12 months worth of cost. All right, like I said, I just got that question yesterday. Now, in this scenario, this is for a brand new contract, right? A brand new, say, 5-year contract. So it's asking, is this a continuation from a previous funding year? I'm going to indicate no. This is brand new. And then we see this copy feature, right? There's nothing to copy, right? This is all new. Because this is Cat 1, there's only one service type, so it's auto-populated for us. Data transmission and or internet access, right? Continue at this point. Now, this is where it's so important that you went through the steps to upload the new contract beforehand, because when you get to this screen, it's going to ask, okay, how are you purchasing? Contract tariffed or month to month? All right, well, this is a 5-year contract. So I click on contract and continue. Then it says, okay, well, point to the contract. This is where if you did not create that contract record yet, you would have to get out of the 471, complete that step, then come back, click on task, create 471, pick up where you left off. Just easier to get it done up front. All right. Again, the default, right, to search for the contract is your build entity number. All right, so you can just leave it as is and click on search. You can search by the nickname you gave it. All right, similar to searching for the 470, when you search by your build entity and you click on search, you're going to see every contract record within Epic. All right, so just like with the 470, you can come and click on the column headers. You can click on the award date, click it twice. Clicking it the second time brings the most current up to the top. check the box to the left to say, yes, this is the correct contract. And again, this is where that being descriptive in the nickname is helpful. All right, click on continue. All right, now it's going to show us, okay, well, here's the detail that you provided, all about that contract, right? So it's going to show, here's the 470 that you referenced. How many bids? Does it allow for the voluntary extensions? The date it will expire if you use the extensions, all of that detail. Now, because this is a brand new funding request, we're not copying from a previous year, the system automatically populates the service start date. All right, the earliest possible date for this upcoming funding year is the July 1, 2026. That's going to be auto-populated there. But it does ask this expiration date. Now, we'll see the expiration date up here, but that would be if we had voluntary extensions and we use those. Here it's asking what's the expiration, right, for the current term, right? Because again, those voluntary extensions are just that. You may not choose to use them. All right. So again, if it's a 5-year contract, June 30th, 2031. Right? Continue. Now here it's asking, it's called fiber request key information. This would be if you're doing a fiber project. I don't see our libraries doing many of these, but this would be where there's special construction. Maybe if you're looking at what we call dark fiber, where somebody else owns it, but you're going to light it, there may be, a hefty installation cost. All right. So if you're doing that type project, you would indicate yes. Otherwise, no, and continue on. All right. Now, because again, like I said, I see very, very few libraries ever utilizing that. But once we click on continue, all right, this is the narrative. I'm going to point this out first. Just give just a brief description. You could say, in this case, I said 1 gig point-to-point bandwidth circuits to my 4 library locations. It can be as simple as that. Now, this part is brand new, all right, invoicing method. This was something that was just added. Now, if any of you applied for the Emergency Connectivity Fund during the pandemic, on the ECF version of the 471, we got this question. All right, so now they've added it to the E-rate 471. So you have to declare at this point what type method you want to use, all right, to get your E-rate funding. All right, remember there's one of 2 options, and it is the applicant choice. This is something both the FCC and USAC is stressing. All right, this is your choice as the E-rate applicant. So you have the choice of paying the bills in full, right? You pay, let's say, the monthly bills, you get the service, you utilize the service. Most of us wait until the end of the funding year, right? And then we file what's called the BEAR form, all right? The Billed Entity Applicant Reimbursement Form, all right? And say, okay, here's the total amount that we paid. Let's say you're at an 80% discount rate, and you're basically, you've paid your 20%. You're telling USAC, okay, send me the balance, send me the 80%. Yeah, and I am really looking forward to this feature. And Christine, I agree with you, because, and I'm hoping this is going to change, all right, the process, because especially with some of the large telcos, right after you file your 471, they send you a form, their own unique form, where they want you to declare, do you want to do BEAR or the other method, SPY? All right. And they expect you to fill out this additional information. We are hoping by declaring it on the 471, they should not be coming back demanding those forms. Is that what you're hearing, Christine?
I am hoping that as well. I do not know if that is the case. Also, even when you do fill out those forms, sometimes those forms get lost. Or they forget to send them to you, or we have another vendor who never sent us anything, and we told them BEAR, and now they're trying to do SPY. So I really hope this clears up a lot of missed communications or lost communications or whatever. Crossing fingers here, Lori.
Definitely crossing fingers. In fact, I had a service provider attending the Category 1 training I conducted yesterday for the Ohio schools. And the vendor asked the question, so will we be able to see on the 471 the selection? Yes, you're going to be able to see it. Look for it. That was the one time I was really glad that a vendor, a service provider, attended my training. Yes, you need to look for it. All right. So again, there's the bare method. Like I said, you pay the invoice in full, you file the paperwork. All right, to say, okay, send me the reimbursement. The other method is the service provider, you communicate with the service provider and say, I want discounted bills. All right. And again, that's your choice as the applicant. We've had some companies push back to say, oh, no, we don't do that. I don't want to have to file an additional form to get paid. This is your choice. And the vendor, by agreeing to participate in E-rate, is agreeing to the rules. Okay. That's sorry on my soapbox here a bit. All right. So with the SPI, the service provider invoice, the vendor service provider, okay, same old. Let's say you're at the 80% discount rate, they would invoice you for your 20%. Then they have to file this service provider invoice to say, okay, USAC, send us the balance, right? We've done the discount. Now, I do want to caution you here because this is typical. Most vendors, because it's kind of no rhyme or reason as to when you actually get your funding letter. Because once you receive the funding letter, then you have to file the form 486, right? You can only do the 486 once the funding letter has been issued. Vendors, service providers cannot file for reimbursement until you've received the funding letter and filed the 486. So what typically happens, let's say you don't receive your funding letter until August or September. And then in October, you file the 486. All right. That means we're several months into the funding year. Most service providers, because they cannot file the SPI for reimbursement until these other pieces have been done, typically they'll go ahead and invoice you in full. All right. I've had some applicants say, well, I'm not paying that full amount. I'm only going to pay the that non-discount portion. You'll have to work that out with the vendor. All right. But if you do, they bill you and you go ahead and pay the full month's cost. Once you get the funding letter and file the 486, the vendor is then to go back and give you an E-rate credit for those first several months. All right. So that's typically how that works. All right. But I just want to give you that heads up that if you use the SPI method, right, it's going to be dependent on when you get the 471 and file the 486 as to when the discounts actually will kick in. All right. Now, the other thing here, because we experienced this with ECF, this is, like I said, you indicate your choice. But it's what if something happens and I change my mind? All right. So USAC has told us that they are working on it. It's not in place yet, but they're working on the process for you to be able to file to say, I want to change that invoice method. Okay. So again, that's not in place yet. They are working on that. If you change your mind, after you submit the 471, but you've not received a funding letter yet, then you can communicate with the PIA reviewer. You can do what's called, a RAL modification and make the change then. It would be much easier, if you know for sure, before the funding letter is issued, to go ahead and make that modification. All right, at that point. All right, let me know if you have questions on that. Okay, now this is the last step, all right, of this part one. Well, now we need to go in and add that line item detail, the cost and the bandwidth speed, all of that detail. All right, so we'll click here where it says save and add, manage line items, FRN line items. All right, well, it says, well, you haven't created any yet. Okay, yep, kind of knew that, right? So we'll click here where it says add new line item. Now, I'm going to go through and explain, there's 4 purposes here. For libraries, I'll point out the ones that we typically use. With the school districts, it gets a little more detailed. All right. But again, when we look at the 4 purposes, like I said, I'll break this down a little further here. Most of our libraries will use either the first or second. The first one is, it means you're getting internet and bandwidth from the service provider. So maybe it's a remote, remote branch, and you cannot get a point-to-point circuit to go from that branch back to your main library, right? Which then uses the Oakland circuit to get out to the real world, right? If it includes both the internet access and the bandwidth, right, it would be that first purpose. If you are using, if you do have the point-to-point circuits from your, let's say the main library is the DMARC, so the circuits going from the main library out to each of your branches, that would be the second purpose. All right. We'll talk about the other two here shortly. Now, if I indicate that, yes, these are for those point-to-point circuits between my branches, I choose that second purpose. And then it's going to say, okay, well, what's the function and then the type of connection? You can always check with the service provider. For most of these, the function is fiber, right? It's least lit fiber. And again, most of these, it would be Ethernet. All right. Now, if you choose an incorrect type there, it is something that you can fix during application review. Your service provider may come back and say, well, nope, you chose the wrong one, right? Again, this is what we typically see. Now, under that function, though, you'll see here the options: fiber, copper. We'll talk about copper when we talk about CABIO. Wireless, all right? So the hotspot, we'll talk about that. Other and miscellaneous. Miscellaneous would include taxes, including the Universal Service Fund, all right, or fee, all right? Now, I also want to point out here, we have that narrative. If you realize that, oh, I put in 1 gig and this is really 500 meg, right? I made a mistake. We do get an opportunity to click here on the funding request narrative. It'll open up that text box and you can make the correction without having to get out and going all the way back through that part 1. All right, we click on save and continue. All right, so now it's saying, okay, so for this fund, for this line item, what's the bandwidth speed? All right, so let's say it's that 1. First, we put in the number, right? So 1. Then we click on the pull down for the bandwidth units. Is it gigs or megs? All right, now when you populate the download speed, it will automatically populate upload. All right, it'll just duplicate whatever you put up there for download. Now, it asks, is this burstable? Typically, the answer is no. If you answer yes, then you have to give the speeds that, that it can burst up to, right? And most of this for least lit fiber, it is not burstable. All right, click on continue. Okay, now we had those purposes, is this internet, and bandwidth? Is it bandwidth only, right? It's asking basically that same question, but a different way, right? So it's asking, is this a direct connection to a single school, library, or a NIF? Remember, that's a non-instructional facility, like a separate library admin building, something not open to the patrons, all right? But is it a connection for internet access, right? I put my little handy dandy graph there, or little GIF there, right? And then we answer yes or no. Second question, is this a connection between eligible schools, libraries, and NIFs that provide a WAN, all right, a wide area network? All right, you cannot answer yes to both, nor can you answer no to both, all right? It's one or the other, all right? So if this is that point-to-point circuit between my library sites, I'm going to answer no to the first question, yes to the second. Now, down at the bottom, right, this is the error message. You get this pretty pink error message if you try to answer yes to both. All right, it physically cannot be both a connection going back to your provider and a circuit between your buildings. All right, now it does ask, does this include firewall service? If you're not sure, check with the service provider. Some service providers roll in firewall, functionality into the service, and that's allowed under category 1. Just make sure that there's no broken out cost for that. I've had some service providers say, oh yeah, we can provide firewall service, and here's the additional cost for that. Let's say $50 a month. If they break out a cost, it's no longer eligible under category 1. All right, again, just a heads up. All right, so indicate there, save and continue. All right, so now it's asking, sorry, it's a busy slide. All right, but now it's asking, what's the monthly recurring cost? All right, so go back, look at the contract. Let's say it's $500 per month. Is there any ineligible cost typically for our libraries? There is not. Then it's asking, what's the monthly quantity? All right, so if you're asking for 3 1 gig circuits, right, they're going down to your 3 library sites, put in a quantity of 3, and then the system does the math. Now, one other thing I want to point out, because I assisted an applicant this past summer into the fall where they received their funding letter and it was much less than what they were expected. And they never got anything from USAC saying that they were being denied funding. Well, when we started digging, discovered that when the applicant went to put in the expiration date, instead of putting June 30th, he put January 30th. All right. So he shorted himself by 5 months. All right. So that's why I'm pointing this out. So, aggressively here. Check that. If you're expecting 12 months, make sure it says 12. All right. Because by time he discovered, the issue, it was too late. He could not file an appeal. He was, well beyond the deadline for that. All right. So make sure that the number of months, right, is 12 months. Now, one-time cost, this is typically if there's an installation charge. If it's a brand new circuits, there may be a small installation cost. All right. If not, plug in zeros. We cannot leave any of the fields blank. All right. Save and continue. Okay. So now it's asking, okay, who's receiving this service? All right. So it's asking, is every entity in the organization receiving this? Well, no, it's only, down to my branch locations, right? Because this is going from the DMARC at where the main library down to my branches. All right. So you would indicate no, and then check to the left, all right, which of those library branches are receiving, right, one of these 3 circuits, whatever that quantity. All right. And then we click on add. All right, so once we do that, it's going to come back with a confirmation to say, okay, here are the entities that you added. All right, then it's going to say, okay, well, now you have a line item out there. So what function did you indicate, right? Ethernet, the quantity, that detail. Then it's going to show the total eligible FRN line item cost. This is what we call the pre-discount amount. So it took that monthly rate times 12 months times the quantity of 3, all right, before any E-rate discounts have been applied to that. Check the number, just make sure that's correct. If you realize that you made a mistake, all right, maybe you chose, an incorrect type, whatever, you can come over here and click on that line item number and it'll just open it back up and you just go, screen by screen until you get to the section where you need to make the correction. All right. Now, let's say you have a contract where maybe you have, let's say, 3 1 gig circuits and 1, 2 gig circuit. All right. You would also need to account for that 2 gig circuit. So we can click on add a new line item and go in and add that detail as well. All right. You want to make sure that all the circuits, all the components of that contract, right, that it's all accounted for. All right, so once you're done adding the line items, click on Save and Continue. All right, now it comes back and says, okay, now you have a funding request. All right, again, we're going to see the nickname, how many line items were included within that funding request. Now it's showing us, here's the amount of funding that you're asking for. So it takes that pre-discount amount, multiplies it by your discount rate. All right, this is what you're expecting from E-rate. Now, again, we still get the opportunity if we need to make corrections. If you want to correct anything in that part 2, right, the cost, the bandwidth speeds, all of that, click on the funding request number. All right, you'll see it there in blue. All right, you click there, and then you come all the way to the right where it says Manage FRN Line Items. If you need to correct something in part 1, right? Maybe you realize you put down an incorrect contract expiration date. All right. It's not real evident when you look at the screen how to do this. All right. But you come over here and you click on that little box to the far left. Then you can come over and click on Edit FRN. That takes you back to that part 1. Like I said, it's not real clear when you look at this. Any questions on all of that? I said, I know it's a lot of information to throw at you. All right. So if this is, this is the only funding request, you can click on Review 471. But before I show you that, let me show you what it looks like if you're doing month to month or CABIO. All right. Because again, you're going to handle this a little bit differently. All right. So again, month to month service means that there is no contract. So you would not have gone through that contract module, uploaded a contract at all. You want to make sure that you have a current bill, right? So whether it's, that CABIO service, or the hotspot for your bookmobile, all right, you're allowed to use a current bill. You can use that bill as a bid response. All right. Now, some CABIO, I do want to point out here, while CABIO does not require a 470, some CABIO service, right, that DSL, that commercially available internet, when you sign up for that, you may initially be in a multi-year contract. Think about like the DSL cable modem that you have at home. When you initially get that service, it's typically, you're locked in, for maybe a year or 2 years. And if you try to cancel early, there's some penalty. All right. So with CABIO, my point to that is you may have a contract for that, even though you didn't have to file a 470. If there's a contract, you should have gone through that contract record, right? And uploaded that contract. When it asks, do you have a 470? Again, you'd say no. All right. But again, if it's under contract, make sure you complete that step. All right. But here I'm going to click on add FRN. All right. Give it a nickname. So in this example, I'm sorry, I've got a space heater on and it's actually getting warm. Turn that off real quick. All right. So again, in this example, it's for that hotspot for the bookmobile or kiosk. So I give it the nickname. Again, this is, month to month. This every year it's treated like new service. So no to, previous year, do not copy. This still fits under data transmission, internet access. Click on continue. Now, this time though, when it's asking, how are you purchasing, you're going to indicate month to month. All right. Now, again, reminder, if this is CABIO, in order to qualify for this, the minimum bandwidth speed, it's a minimum of 100 meg by 10. All right, that's the minimum. And then the cost per library site cannot exceed $300 per month. All right, so again, $3,600 for the year, right, per location. All right, if you meet that criteria, no 470 is required. And I mentioned about be prepared to have that monthly bill, because USAC's there's no contract for them to go back and look at. They will want to see the bill to verify the cost and the type service. Right, continue. All right, so it's going to ask how many bids were received. All right, well, if you put that 470 out there for your hotspots, let's say you received 3 bids. All right, provide that there. If you received no bids, but you're using your current bill, all right, you can put 1. Right, because again, that bill acts as a bid. All right, now, was a 470 filed? In this case, I would say yes, right, because that's required for the hotspot. If this is CABIO, I can indicate no. All right, then we go out and we search for the 470, just like we saw with the contract module. All right, so we'll come down here. The default is search by bin. We click on search. I click on the funding year twice to bring the 2026 up to the top. Check the box to the left. All right, what was the 470 that had my hotspot listed? All right, and I click on continue. Again, if it's CABIO, you're going to answer no, so you're not going to see any of this. All right, again, like we saw before, what is the spin? All right, so go out to E-Rate Central, right, grab that number, check the box to the left, and continue. All right, now, again, it's going to auto-populate the service start date. The earliest date will show up is the July 1, 2026. But then it's asking, when does the service end? For month-to-month service, where there is no contract, you cannot put a date beyond the end of the funding year. All right, so the most you can go out is June 30th, 2027 for this upcoming funding year. Click on continue. Pricing confidentiality, again, indicate no. Continue. No for the fiber, right? This is the hotspot. No and continue. All right, then we get to the narrative. All right, so here's just a quick CABIO example. Internet access for our 3 branch library locations. You don't even have to detail the speeds or anything if you don't want, because in part 2, you're going to provide that information. Here's a hotspot example. It can be, as simple as mobile hotspots to be used by our bookmobile. All right, again, as simple as that. But we still have to indicate what is the invoicing method. All right, so we do this per funding request. You may want discounted bills for your bandwidth, right, to your branches. But for the hotspot, maybe you decide, no, the cost is small enough. I'm just going to go ahead and pay that. And then at the end of the funding year, file for reimbursement. All right. This is a designation per funding request. All right. So make your choice there. And then we'll click on add the line items, right? We still have to add the cost and that information. Oh, sorry, there. So I'll click on add a new line item. Now for the hotspot, it's this first purpose. It's internet, right, for library location. Now here for the hotspot, we're going to choose wireless. And then we see the type of connection. We'll see data plan for portable device. All right, so those are the options if you're asking for the hotspot, like I said, bookmobile or kiosk. All right, save and continue. Now, this may look silly, but when you're asking for a hotspot, is it a 4G, a 5G, hotspot? That's how I indicate the speeds. All right. I had an IT director say, well, Lori, a hotspot's not going to give you 4 gigs. I know that. I've actually gone out online and figured out what the actual speed is. PIA has never taken issue with this. All right. If it's a 4G hotspot, put 4Gs. And no for burstable, save and continue. Okay, I wanted to show you, this is what it looks like for CABIO. All right, for most of these, it's copper and cable modem. All right, if in doubt, it may be copper, and you may see DSL as an option. All right, PIA, the reviewers will ask for a copy of the bill. When they look at it, they may come back and say, well, no, I disagree. Instead of cable modem, this is actually DSL. They can make the corrections for you. All right, but again, this is what we typically choose. All right, save and continue. All right, so again, CABIO example. So let's say, I look at my bill and, the business class internet I'm receiving is, 300 by 30. All right, provide that information there. No to being burstable, save and continue. Now, again, because this is providing internet to those library sites, I'll answer yes to the first question, no to the second. And these typically don't have firewalls built in. So no, and continue. All right, so then we put in the cost, just like we saw earlier. So, go back, look at my bill. Okay, the hotspot is $39.99 per month, and there's no ineligible cost. And I have 2 hotspots, one for my bookmobile and say one for my kiosk. Zeros on the right-hand side for one-time cost, save and continue. And again, verify that, yes, it's, for 12 months. Okay, so now, which entities are using this? If I have an entity number for my bookmobile, I'll certainly select that. If not, choose your main library. All right, again, that's fine. And we click on add. If it's for the CABIO, again, you're going to choose the branches that's receiving the CABIO service. Save and continue. All right, and then we'll see the line item there, just like we saw earlier. Any questions on that? Okay. Let me show you the copy real quick. All right, because this is our best friend. If you're in year 2 or more of a multi-year contract and you've had no changes, right, the cost is still the same, we have the benefit of copying. All right, we still give it a nickname for this upcoming funding year, right? So I put FY2026. This time, though, when it asks, is this a continuation from a previous year, indicate yes, and then enter the 2025 funding request number. And this is something I get questions on a lot. Well, this is year 4 of a 5-year. Should I put the very first year's funding request? No, put, again, 2025, the most previous. All right. And then we get to click on copy. Now, when we click on copy, it's going to ask, okay, well, what do you want to copy? You can search by the 471 number or the funding request number. Well, since I just had to put the funding request number here, it's easiest, just copy and paste it here. All right, and click on search. It comes back with, okay, this is what we found. Check the box, confirm, and yes, you want to copy. All right, so again, this is the easiest place to get this information. Go back to that E-Rate Central site, click on 2025, right, as the most, the previous funding year. And then you'll see, look through, verify that, yep, this is the service that I want to copy over. All right, and then you can just highlight, copy and paste. All right, now, once you, let me go back here a step. Once I click on continue and yes, all right, then we're going to get the little spinning indicator. It's going to continue spinning until you click on refresh. It's not going to move forward on its own. Just give it about 30 seconds, a minute, click on refresh. If it's not done, it'll just continue spinning. Give it another, 10, 15 seconds, click on refresh. Once it's done thinking about it, you'll get this confirmation that says the FRN has been successfully copied. All right. But until you get the screen, it's not done. And I can tell you the closer we get to the 471 deadline, the busier the portal becomes, the slower, the longer this takes. All right, I do want to point out here, I've highlighted it in yellow. When we use the copy feature, it will not copy over dates, the service start date, like we saw earlier, or the end date. All right, so you just want to be prepared for that. All right, so we click on continue. All right. Now, once we click on continue, it's just a lot of clicking on continue. All right. It's just going to show you, okay, here's the information we copied over. And a lot of this, some of it you can change, some you cannot. All right. So service type's already selected. Click on continue. How we purchased is already selected. Click on continue. All right. It's going to show the contract that was referenced. Now, this is where you need to, manually key in the service start date. All right. So July 1st, 2026. And then whenever this contract will expire, based on the current term. All right. Now, you can go back. You cannot get the expiration date from the E-Rate Central site, but you can go back and look at last year's 471. All right. Or certainly pull up the contract document. All right. So once we key in the dates, but again, this is where you really want to be careful, right? Not to make a typo. Right, and continue. All right, how did you answer those fiber questions? Continue, and then it's going to show you, here's the information that was entered in the narrative last year. If you need to make corrections there, you can correct that. And even with copying, we still get the option here, right? We have to indicate, what's the invoicing method, right? Bearer SPI. Now, if nothing changed, right? The cost, everything's everything's the same, bandwidth, whatever. You can just go ahead and click on save and view FRNs. If, let's say your provider changed cost for some reason, right? We can click on save and manage those FRN line items. You can drill down to the line item and change the cost. Okay, typically we don't have to do that. All right, save and continue. Excuse me, save and view FRNs. All right, I do want to show you, this is what it looks like if you clicked on that manage line items, click on the line item, all right, and just keep going through, make the corrections. All right, so once you're done adding your funding request, last step here then is to actually do the review and submit the form. All right, so completing the application. All right, so when we click on review, it's going to ask us, okay, do you want to do a refresh? Basically, go ahead and move forward and complete the certification now, or do you want to resume this later? All right, it's your choice. It doesn't take very long to complete this last step. You risk if you say resume later, forgetting about it. All right, so if you have the time, go ahead and finish it. All right, but again, you could click on resume later. All right, so let's say click on refresh. All right, so it will come back once it's done, thinking about it, and it's going to give you a PDF draft of the 471, right? So you can click on that hyperlink, right? Click on that document name and look the form over. All right, just check it over, make sure is everything correct. This would also give you an opportunity if you wanted to download that PDF, if you want to share it with someone else beforehand. All right, so again, you can pull that down. If you realize that you made a mistake, in the lower left-hand corner, there's the edit form option. When you click there, it's going to take you all the way back to the very beginning of the application, all right, where you gave it an application nickname. You just keep clicking on continue, right, till you get to the section where you need to make that correction. All right, if everything looks correct, you check the box right below that document name, right, that's saying, yes, I certify that the information is correct. All right, now, again, we have a couple of options here. Continue to certification or send for certification. If you are a full right user in the portal, such as the admin in the portal, you have the ability to fill out the form and certify it. If you're a partial right user, right, you won't get the option to continue. If you're a partial right user, it means you only have the authority to fill out the form, but you cannot certify it. All right. So if you're in that situation, you have to click on send for certification, and then the portal will send an email to whoever has full rights, like the admin. All right. They'll get an email letting them know that there's a task they need to complete. Do not count on them seeing that email. It might wind up in their spam folder, get buried in the inbox, not realize that there's something they need to do. Walk over, call the individual, whatever, make sure they complete the step. And I stress this each year, we have, a few applicants that miss the deadline because the other individual never completed this step. All right. But here I'm going to say, yep, we're full rights. I'm going to click on continue. All right. I do want to point out here, because again, this is where some people get stuck. If you do that resume later, right, I can't find my 471. All right. If you click on resume task later, come up to that task bar again, that task option. And this time you're going to look for something that says review PDF of the 471. Right. That's where you pick back up again. All right. So once we click on continue to certification, now the certification options have changed a little bit with this version of the 471. We used to have two certifications right off the bat we had to check. That's been removed. All right. You'll see the information further down. All right. It's going to show us if you have multiple funding requests, it just adds everything up. Here's the total pre-discount amount, right, for all the funding requests on this application. Then it multiplies that by your discount rate, right, whatever that is. That says, okay, here's the amount of funding you're asking E-rate for. And then the third dollar value, this is the amount you're responsible for, that non-discount portion. Now, we still have this total budgeted amount allocated to resources not eligible for E-rate support. All right. It will have zeros in that field. Now, on our last state E-rate coordinator call with USAC, we asked the question, well, will it let you, certify? And it does. If you leave it at zero, or will PIA take issue with it? That's yet to be seen. I did not mention this earlier, but just a heads up. They actually started on January 2nd. There is a new company, okay, a BPO, that's handling the application review. All right. Maximus was the previous company. They held the contract for 5 years, right? It just changed. So we have a new company handling the application review. We don't know what to expect yet. We do know that, like in previous years, as fast as applicants are submitting 471s, sometimes within hours, people are getting review questions. Please let me or Christine know if you get strange, weird review questions, questions you've never gotten before. It's something that USAC has asked us to please let them know. All right. Because again, this is a whole new company. We don't know fully what to expect. And Christine, have you heard the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. They've been kind of this company answered the phones before. They didn't do the review. They answered the phones. So they should know more about what's going on than the last time that change happened. But we're still expecting a few things. And we really do need to give feedback whenever you have something weird pop up. So just an email is perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and because they did have the contract for the help desk for at least a couple of years. I can't remember when they exactly started, but that means that they do, have a little more information, a little more E-rate knowledge coming in. That's our hope. All right. But back to this budget amount here, like I said, if you leave it at zero, we don't know what this new, company will do with it. Put in a reasonable dollar amount, though. So what it's asking for here, if you're asking for E-rate, to cover your internet cost, well, in order to access the internet within our library locations, we have to have technology. E-rate does not cover end-user devices, right? Desktops, laptops, tablets, right? But you have to have that technology to utilize the internet. All right, to keep those, computers up to date, to maintain them, to pay the electric bills. All right, those are all things E-rate won't cover. But do you have the financial means, right, to support that, those needs. Okay. So put in a reasonable number. I can tell you, I've only had one occurrence where a reviewer took issue with the dollar value here. Right. This is not something they will ever. I've never, like I said, with the exception of this one time, where they'll come back and say, okay, you said X dollar amount, prove you have those funds. All right, this is an estimated number, because maybe you fully intend to have this amount available, but then maybe a levy fails, right? And so you have to pull that back. All right, again, make it reasonable. The one time where it was challenged, it was a very small charter school with like 100 kids, 100 students. They meant to put in like 4,000. They got carried away and put in 4 million. And USAC did pounce on that one. All right. But again, typically this is not challenged. Now, these two, we've had these questions before. Yes, no, just say no. All right. It's like, okay, could I make that a bigger font? If need be, I will. All right. If you answer yes to either one of these, you're in E-rate hot water. All right. Either one of these, it means that either your service provider is helping you come up with the funds for that portion E-rate won't cover, or they're waiving billing you for the part E-rate won't cover. When I was an IT director, a technology coordinator at a school district, I regularly had vendors, offer, if you choose us, you're at an 80% discount rate, we'll file the SPI, to get the 80% of the funds. We won't bother billing you for that 20%. That is against the rules and will get you into real hot water. All right. So no to both of those. All right, this is just a really long screen. As you scroll down, here are all the certifications, right? Read through them, make sure you're comfortable. They all have to be checked. Someone asked the other day, well, what if I take issue with one and I don't want to check it? Well, then you have to click on back and send it to somebody else to certify, all right? Because you cannot move forward and complete the certification unless they're all checked. All right, so once I get all those checked, click on certify, you get the pop-up, okay, here's the penalty for false statements. Right? This is when I take a deep breath, click on yes. All right. So once you indicate yes, yep, you want to certify, you will get a confirmation. I do suggest, do a screen print. If you want to print it, hard copy, whatever, make sure you document this, that part of that, documentation, because it will show the date and time of the certification. It doesn't happen often, but we've had some occasions where the portal hiccuped, right, and couldn't find the 471. Or we've seen the last couple of years, if you're doing this really close, like on the last day, all right, coming up on the deadline, doing this, late in the afternoon, where it populated an incorrect date and time on USAC's end. All right. But the applicant had their certification, that basically to prove, yes, I really did meet, the deadline. All right. So again, document that. Now there is a link here that says, please click here to access a certified copy. This typically takes several minutes for the system to generate this, but it does give you the opportunity now, if you wanted to go ahead and pull down a certified copy of the application, maybe, put it in your files, share with others, within your organization. All right. So once you have that, you can click on close. We're just about done here. All right. So next steps, what to expect after you submit the 471. If you need to go back and, pull up a copy, maybe you didn't get a chance, right, to pull down that certified copy. To find your form, from the landing page, scroll all the way down to the very bottom. There's a section labeled FCC Forms and Post-Commitment Requests. The default to search is 470, so click on the pull down, choose 471, choose 2026 for the funding year, and also make sure under status that the radio button for all is selected. All right, make sure you're seeing everything. All right. Now, sometimes, like with the status, it might take them, maybe a little period of time, maybe a minute. We've seen this with the 470, where the status will switch over from incomplete to certified. All right. I was filing a 470 just the other day, and it took 2 or 3 minutes, and I had to keep refreshing the browser before it changed from incomplete. All right. So again, make sure you say all for the status. Application number is the hyperlink. You can click there. All right. Now, once you click there, Christine, did you have a question or comment?
Well, I'm wondering if Paula did, because I think, Paula, you were unmuted,
Paula,
and I don't know if you do. Maybe I'm just being.
Oh, No, sorry, I'm
Nope.
good.
Oh, okay. All right. All good. All
Paying
good.
attention. Okay, so once you click on the application number, we're going to see some menu options here. If you realize that you made a mistake after you submit it, okay, maybe you put an incorrect quantity, whatever, an incorrect date. You changed your mind about the invoicing method. You can click here where it says related actions, right? After clicking on the application number, and then we see the option here, submit modification request. All right. So when you click on that, it's going to say, okay, what do you need to correct? Is it something about one of the entities, right? Something that has to do with, who's receiving the service, or is it something about the application itself, right? The cost, the date, the quantity. All right. Now, I do have a guide out on my website under that resource library page that will step you through this if you need to make a correction. Okay. The other thing to be aware of is, when you receive those review questions. The way we do this, the easiest way to drill down to those questions is go back down, search for the 471, click on the application number. There's one of two options. The easiest, you'll see the option here, all right, the third menu option, review inquiries, right? When you click there, then you're going to see, a table, right, that shows you the type questions, and then you can drill down, right? You can also click on related actions, and then you see the option, respond to inquiries. Either one of those work. Now, the kinds of things that reviewers are going to look for, if you added a new library location, they're going to want a validation. That's something Don or Christine can write for you, right? I validate for the schools, Christine or Don. Christine, are you writing these or is Don? I just want to make sure who to send them to.
So Don is writing them as the executive director of Oakland. I have not been tapped yet.
Lucky you. Yeah. Okay. So reach out to Don. All right. And he can write that validation. All right. This is also if you changed, updated your square footage, they're going to want validation for that. Now, this is one of the things we've gotten in previous years that I've taken issue with. If you have a reviewer reach out to you and ask for validation of the school district's information, the enrollment, and the lunch counts, you as a library cannot validate that, right? So if you get that inquiry, first off, please let me know that, and I'm going to share that with USAC admin staff. All right, they should not be asking a library for that information. All right, so just a heads up there. If you ask for month to month or a CABIO, and you've got a copy of a current bill, that's a typical, reasonable question, right, for that hotspot, whatever. All right. So again, if just watch for it. Now, if you realize sometimes the reviewer will come back and say, well, you put this information, within the funding request, but based on your bill, it really should be this. All right. And they will allow you to make those corrections, or will make those corrections for you. They'll do those modifications. Yeah. Have your documentation handy, right? The copy of the bill that you base the cost on, all of that information. When you receive the inquiry, we're given usually 15 days to respond when we get that initial inquiry. You can, within the portal, ask for an extension. When you click on request extension, the system automatically grants the first time you ask. It will extend another 7 days. All right. Now, something again that we've seen in previous years, let's say you get your inquiry and you have 15 days to respond. Well, you want to go ahead and get this off your desk. So maybe, in day 2, you go ahead and provide information. We have had issues in the past where the reviewer comes back the very next day and says, your information was incomplete. You now have 24 hours to provide us the information. Again, let me know if that happens. If you do get that, definitely go in and ask for the extension really quick. But because I've made this argument with the reviewers, I had 15 days. I answered quickly, and now my time has been shortened. Right? Again, please let me know if that happens to you. If there's a question you're not sure how to respond, Christine and I both have access to the inquiries. We can go in and look at the questions. We can help you figure out what it is they're asking for. Okay. Anything you want to add there, Christine?
Just nodding in agreement that we are here to help.
Yeah. because sometimes the way things are worded, you're not quite sure. And don't sweat it, right? Just reach out. Okay, so the happy day is getting your funding letter, right? The FCDL, that's the funding commitment decision letter. And I stress this every year, check that letter over closely, right? You'll get this in an email, and there will be a nice, pretty PDF, right, of that funding decision. Check it over. And I'm sorry, Christine, I'm going to have to pause for just 1 second. Can you pause me? Okay, so yeah, so when you receive the funding letter, like I said, you'll get this very pretty PDF. It'll show you here's the amount of funding you requested, here's the amount that's been approved. So again, Christine was saying, make sure, verify those amounts. If something was reduced, it's going to tell you why. All right. You made an error, whatever. Sometimes though, so like what Christine was mentioning, where they accidentally just asked for 1 year. Well, USAC didn't see that as an issue. All right. Again, at a school district, same thing. It was, well, you put in a date, you only asked for 6 months, for 7 months, for 1 month. Right. They didn't see that as an error. Right. So then it fell on the applicant, right, to notice what was going on, that reduction. All right. The reason we stress this so much is you have 60 days from the date the letter was issued to file an appeal, right? And I've heard people make the comment, well, but I didn't see it until just last month. Well, you got the email 4 months ago. All right. It's based on the date. The 60-day countdown starts the date the letter was issued, not when you get around to looking at it. Check it over. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, I do want to make you aware, last thing here, just some things you can do, but this is after you receive the funding letter, right? Because you can make changes, during that submit modification or during PIA, that PIA review. All right, but after the funding letter is issued, well, what if you realized, like in this case, you put down the wrong expiration date? You used the wrong service provider identification number. You put down, or maybe your contract allows you to change bandwidth levels. Maybe you have 500 meg, because we've had this happen in previous years where we had 500 meg, but the service provider would allow us, our contract allowed us to do an upgrade at the same cost, right? Basically, you're changing the service after the fact because it's allowed within our contract. We can do what's called a service substitution. All right. I won't get into details as to how to do all of this. Just know that you do have these options available. Any questions?
Either stunned silence or
Yeah. I know it's a lot of info.
I appreciate the detail, and I appreciate the fact that we have the handouts now and we'll have the recording. It takes a little longer to make sure that we get the transcript right, but you'll get the first notification when the recording is ready. You can always go back to that on YouTube at any time. And Lori is wonderful at answering. There you are. That segue. Lori is wonderful at answering your questions. All sorts of contact options for you.
Please, yeah, don't hesitate. I'm constantly watching my email. This time of year, I know Christine and I both get lots of questions, but I'm usually pretty quick to respond. If at any time, if it takes, 2 days for me to respond, that is not usual. All right. Send me another email or just give me a call. I welcome, because sometimes the questions can be kind of detailed, kind of difficult to answer in an email. So feel free to give me a call.
I really appreciate that call option because sometimes there are nuances that you have to go back and forth on. But I will also say this is year 4/5. Anyway, I'm starting to lose count, Lori. I guess that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
But and so I can handle a lot of things, and when I can't, I know that Lori's here to have all of our backs. Um,
And if I don't know the answer, then I know others who more than likely will. So yeah,
Truly, there is a tremendous community among the folks who do consulting or state coordinating, or both, and we rely on each other. It's a team sport.
it definitely is. And I do appreciate everybody's patience.
All right. Well, so far I have not seen any questions pop on. I have not seen anybody unmute themselves. I'm sorry, unmute, mic up. Anyway, um, if you do have any questions, there's the information. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.